They call it family, a word that should feel like warmth, like shelter, like home. But for some, that word carries weight instead of comfort. It arrives with rules you never agreed to, expectations you were born into, and silence you were trained to accept. From the outside, everything looks normal. Smiles at gatherings, polite conversations, traditions repeated without question. Yet inside, something feels wrong. You feel small where you should feel safe. You feel watched where you should feel free. And slowly, without anyone raising their voice, you learn the most dangerous lesson of all, that your feelings must come last. This is not a story of hatred, it is a story of awakening. Because the deepest wounds are rarely inflicted by strangers. They are shaped by familiar hands and familiar words, not through shouting, but through disappointment, not through cruelty, but through constant correction. You were told who to be before you had the chance to discover yourself. You were praised when you complied and ignored when you questioned. And over time, you began to doubt your own instincts, wondering if strength meant silence and love meant endurance. Tonight, we are not here to accuse. We are here to observe, to name what was never named, to shine light on patterns that hide behind tradition and authority. Because once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. And once you understand that respect should never cost you your identity, you begin to reclaim something powerful, your voice, your boundaries, your right to breathe without guilt. This is where the story truly begins. When love becomes a cage, love is supposed to feel like safety. It is meant to expand you, not shrink you. Yet for many, love arrives with conditions so subtle they go unnoticed at first. It sounds like concern, looks like guidance, and presents itself as responsibility. You are told it is for your own good, that obedience equals respect, that questioning means ingratitude. Slowly, the space around you tightens, not violently, not suddenly, but carefully. So carefully that by the time you realize you can't breathe, you no longer remember what freedom felt like. This is how a cage is built, not with cruelty, but with constant control wrapped in affection. In such environments, love is measured by compliance. You are valued when you align, praised when you conform, and corrected when you differ. Your opinions are tolerated only when they mirror the dominant voice in the room. Dreams are supported only if they fit the approved script. Over time, you learn to edit yourself before you speak, to silence thoughts before they become words. You become skilled at reading moods, predicting reactions, and adjusting your identity to avoid conflict. This is not maturity, this is survival, and survival, when mistaken for love, slowly erodes the soul. The most dangerous part of this cage is that it does not look like one. From the outside, it appears functional, even admirable. Others may say you are lucky, that you come from a good place, that you should be grateful, and you try to be. You tell yourself others have it worse. You minimize your discomfort. You dismiss your pain because it has no dramatic shape. There are no obvious scars, no loud chaos, only a quiet, persistent pressure to be less than you are. And so you stay, not because you are weak, but because you were taught that leaving means losing love. Inside this cage, boundaries are treated as threats. The moment you ask for space, you are accused of distance. The moment you assert your needs, you are labeled difficult. Emotional independence is mistaken for disrespect. You are expected to carry roles that were assigned to you long before you understood their weight. The peacemaker, the responsible one, the silent one, the one who never causes trouble. These roles become identities, and identities become prisons. You forget that you were once a person before you became a function. What makes this experience so confusing is that care and control often wear the same face. Advice becomes instruction, concern becomes surveillance, support becomes interference, and because it is delivered with familiarity, you doubt your own discomfort. You wonder if you are overreacting, if you are too sensitive, if the problem is you. This self-doubt is not accidental. It is the natural outcome of being raised in a space where your inner voice was consistently overridden by louder ones. Eventually, you stop trusting yourself altogether. But cages, no matter how carefully built, have one flaw. They rely on your belief. The moment you recognize that love should not require the abandonment of self, the structure begins to weaken. Awareness is the first crack in the wall. You start to notice how often your peace is traded for approval, how frequently your silence is rewarded, how rarely your authenticity is welcomed. And in that noticing, something shifts. You realize that discomfort is not betrayal. Questioning is not disloyalty. Wanting more does not make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. Breaking free does not begin with rebellion. It begins with clarity, with understanding that you are allowed to exist without explanation. That love, real love, does not demand constant sacrifice of identity. You are not meant to be molded into someone else's comfort zone. You are meant to grow, to evolve, to define yourself beyond inherited expectations. This realization can be frightening because cages feel safe when they are familiar. But safety that costs you your voice is not safety. It is confinement. When love becomes a cage, the bravest act is not escape, but recognition. To name what has been normalized, to acknowledge the quiet ways you were shaped, limited and restrained, and to gently, firmly decide that your life deserves more than permission-based existence. This keynote is not about rejecting love, it is about redefining it. Because love that cannot survive your freedom was never meant to protect you, it was meant to control you. The quiet damage of being the good one. There is a particular kind of child, sibling, or family member who learns very early that peace is earned through self-denial. They are praised for being understanding, for being mature beyond their years, for not causing trouble. They learn to read the room before they learn to read themselves. While others express anger, confusion, or desire freely, this one absorbs tension silently, believing that strength means endurance. Over time, this role becomes a badge of honor. Being the good one feels safe, it feels necessary, and slowly it becomes invisible. The quiet damage begins when responsibility replaces choice. You do not decide to be the stable one, it is assigned to you. When emotions run high, all eyes turn toward you, not to ask how you feel, but to expect you to hold everything together. Your needs are postponed because others seem louder, more urgent, more fragile. You are told you can handle it, and you do, again and again. But what no one notices is the cost of being endlessly capable. The cost is that no one learns how to show up for you. Being the good one means learning the art of emotional restraint. You measure your words carefully, not because you lack thoughts, but because you have learned that honesty can disrupt balance. You soften truths, delay conversations, and carry burdens privately to keep harmony intact. Over time, your inner world becomes crowded with unspoken feelings. Resentment is not allowed to surface, so it sinks deeper. Exhaustion is not acknowledged, so it disguises itself as numbness. You appear calm, but inside something is wearing thin. This role is especially damaging because it is rewarded. You are admired for your patience, trusted for your reliability, and relied upon for your consistency. Yet admiration without care is a hollow thing. People take comfort in your presence but rarely ask what it costs you to provide it. Your emotional labor becomes expected, not appreciated. And because you were never taught to ask for help, you convince yourself that needing support would mean failure. You become strong at the expense of being human. As time passes, you may notice a strange emptiness. You do what is right, you meet expectations, you fulfill obligations, but joy feels distant, decisions feel heavy, even rest feels undeserved. This is not because you lack gratitude. It is because you have been living in response to others rather than in alignment with yourself. When your identity is built around being acceptable, you lose touch with what is authentic. You begin to wonder who you would be if no one needed you to be good. The most painful truth is that being the good one often teaches you that love must be earned through usefulness. You are valued for what you provide, not for who you are. And when you finally slow down, when you hesitate, when you say no for the first time, confusion follows. Some may withdraw, some may accuse you of changing. This moment can feel like betrayal, but it is actually revelation. It shows you that the role you played was more important to others than your well-being. Healing begins when you recognize that goodness is not self-erasure. Kindness does not require silence. Responsibility does not require emotional neglect. You are allowed to have needs without justifying them. You are allowed to rest without explanation. Learning this may feel uncomfortable at first because your worth was never tied to being visible, only to being dependable. Reclaiming yourself means disappointing expectations that were never fair to begin with. Letting go of the good one identity does not mean becoming careless or unkind. It means becoming whole. It means allowing your voice to take up space, even when it disrupts the familiar balance. It means trusting that relationships which truly matter will adapt, not punish you for growing. This keynote is a reminder that you were never meant to carry everything alone. You were meant to live, not just endure quietly. Familiar voices that shape your inner fear. Long before fear becomes a feeling, it becomes a voice, a quiet one, persistent, often calm. It does not shout or threaten, it advises. It tells you to be careful, to lower your expectations, to stay where you are. And because this voice sounds familiar, you trust it. You assume it is wisdom. You assume it is instinct. But if you listen closely, you may realize it does not belong to you at all. It is an echo, formed in moments when your thoughts were questioned, your confidence was corrected, and your curiosity was met with caution rather than encouragement. These voices take root early. They emerge in subtle phrases repeated over time, reminders of what is acceptable, warnings about standing out, suggestions to wait, to doubt, to hold back. None of it feels harmful on the surface. It feels practical, sensible, responsible. Yet repetition has power. When the same message is delivered again and again, it reshapes perception. You begin to associate ambition with risk, expression with danger, and independence with loss. Fear becomes normalized, and hesitation begins to feel like maturity. As you grow, these voices follow. They appear at the edge of decisions, whispering consequences before possibilities. They remind you of past mistakes, magnify uncertainty, and minimize your ability to adapt. You hesitate before speaking, not because you lack clarity, but because you anticipate judgment. You delay action, not because you are unprepared, but because you have been trained to believe that readiness must be perfect. This internal restraint is not laziness or weakness. It is learned caution, inherited from environments where confidence was quietly discouraged. What makes this inner fear so powerful is that it disguises itself as self-protection. It convinces you that staying small keeps you safe, that silence prevents conflict, that obedience preserves connection. And for a time, this may even be true. But safety that demands invisibility comes at a cost. The more you listen to this voice, the further you drift from your authentic instincts. You begin to second-guess joy, to question opportunities, to mistrust excitement. Your world shrinks, not because life has less to offer, but because fear has learned how to speak your language. Eventually, you may notice a strange contradiction. You are capable, thoughtful, and aware, yet you feel restrained. You watch others take steps you imagine but do not take. You understand what you want, but hesitate to claim it. This gap between ability and action creates frustration, and that frustration often turns inward. You blame yourself for not being bold enough, not being decisive enough, not being fearless enough. What you do not see is that fear was installed long before you had the tools to question it. The turning point comes when you begin to observe your thoughts rather than obey them. When you pause and ask, is this caution or conditioning? Is this my intuition or a memory repeating itself? This moment of awareness is subtle, but it is powerful. Because fear loses authority when it is identified. Once you recognize that not every warning is truth, you gain the ability to choose differently. You realize that discomfort does not always signal danger, it often signals growth. Reclaiming your inner voice is not about eliminating fear. It is about redefining its role. Fear can inform, but it should not control. It can advise, but it should not decide. You learn to listen without surrendering, to acknowledge doubt without letting it dictate your path. This process takes patience, because voices that have guided you for years do not disappear overnight. But each time you act despite hesitation, you weaken their grip. This keynote is about understanding that your mind was shaped in conversation with others, but it is not owned by them. The fears you carry may have origins, but they do not have to have permanence. You are allowed to rewrite the dialogue inside you, to replace inherited caution with earned confidence. And when you do, you discover something liberating. The quiet voice beneath the fear was always yours, waiting to be heard, breaking away without becoming bitter. There comes a moment when endurance no longer feels noble, when silence no longer feels peaceful, and when staying begins to cost more than leaving. This moment is not dramatic. It does not arrive with noise or confrontation. It arrives quietly, as clarity. You realize that distance is not the same as hostility, and that stepping back does not require anger. Yet many hesitate here, not because they lack strength, but because they fear what separation might turn them into. They worry that choosing themselves will harden their hearts, that protecting their peace will somehow erase their compassion. Bitterness is often misunderstood. It is not born from distance. It is born from suppression, from staying too long where you are unseen, from swallowing truths that deserve air. When people remain in environments that consistently invalidate them, resentment grows in silence. Breaking away, when done consciously, is not an act of rejection. It is an act of emotional responsibility. It is the choice to prevent damage rather than react to it. Distance, in this sense, becomes a form of care. Leaving without bitterness requires intention. It means understanding that not every connection must be severed through conflict. Some simply need redefining. You can love people without allowing them access to every part of you. You can respect history without repeating it. This kind of separation is not loud. It does not demand explanation or permission. It is expressed through boundaries, clear, calm, and consistent. Boundaries are not walls. They are guidelines that teach others how to treat you. One of the hardest lessons in this process is accepting that not everyone will understand your growth. When you change the rules of engagement, those who benefited from the old version of you may feel uncomfortable. Some may interpret your silence as coldness, your limits as distance, your calm as detachment. This reaction is not evidence of wrongdoing on your part. It is evidence of adjustment. You are no longer available in the ways you once were, and that shift challenges familiar dynamics. Breaking away without bitterness also requires letting go of the need to be validated. Closure does not always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from acceptance. The acceptance that certain people are unable to meet you where you are, not because they are unworthy, but because they are limited by their own frameworks. Waiting for understanding can keep you emotionally tied to places you have already outgrown. Freedom begins when you release the expectation that others must approve your healing. This stage of growth invites a deeper form of strength. Emotional neutrality, not indifference, but balance. You learn to respond instead of react, to observe instead of absorb, to choose peace over proving a point. This neutrality allows you to move forward without carrying resentment as baggage. You stop rehearsing old conversations. You stop explaining your worth. You stop seeking justice through recognition. Your energy is redirected inward, where it can finally be used to build rather than defend. Choosing calm over conflict does not mean suppressing truth. It means expressing it selectively. Not everyone deserves access to your vulnerability. Not every situation requires your participation. You become discerning, not distant, grounded, not guarded. This discernment protects your compassion rather than eroding it. It allows you to remain kind without becoming available to harm. Breaking away without bitterness is a quiet victory. It is waking up one day and realizing that the weight you carried is no longer yours, that your peace is intact, not because the world changed, but because you did. This keynote is a reminder that you can leave with grace, grow without resentment, and move forward without losing yourself. Strength in its highest form is not loud. It is steady, redefining family through self-respect. For many, the word family is treated as a final authority, a concept that cannot be questioned, only endured. It is presented as permanent, unquestionable, and immune to evaluation. You are taught that belonging requires loyalty, that loyalty requires sacrifice, and that sacrifice requires silence. Over time, this belief becomes deeply rooted. You begin to associate self-respect with selfishness and distance with disloyalty. But growth has a way of challenging inherited definitions. And when it does, it asks a difficult question. What if family is not defined by proximity, but by how safe you feel being yourself? Self-respect changes the lens through which you see relationships. It introduces standards where there were once only obligations. You begin to notice how certain interactions leave you depleted, how certain conversations demand emotional compromise, how certain dynamics require you to shrink. This awareness is not judgment, it is clarity. You are no longer asking, do they mean well? You are asking, how does this affect me? And that shift alone redefines everything. Redefining family does not mean rejecting your past. It means refusing to let the past dictate your future. You can acknowledge shared history without allowing it to override your present needs. Self-respect teaches you that access is not automatic. It is earned through consistency, mutual regard, and emotional safety. When these qualities are absent, distance becomes a form of self-care, not abandonment. This understanding frees you from the guilt that once kept you bound to harmful patterns. As you grow into this new definition, you may begin to form connections that feel unfamiliar at first. Relationships built on choice rather than obligation, on respect rather than expectation. These bonds feel lighter, not because they lack depth, but because they lack fear. There is room for honesty without punishment, space for difference without rejection. In these environments, you do not have to perform or prove. You are valued not for what you endure, but for who you are. This shift often brings grief, not because you are losing people, but because you are mourning what never existed, the version of family you hoped for, the safety you waited for. Allowing yourself to feel this grief is part of self-respect. It honors your emotional truth rather than dismissing it. And through this process, you learn that disappointment does not mean failure. It means clarity has arrived. Redefining family also means redefining your role within it. You are no longer the fixer, the mediator, or the silent supporter at the expense of your own well-being. You show up as you are, not as you are needed to be. This may alter dynamics, and some may resist the change. But self-respect is not negotiable. It does not ask for approval. It stands firm, quiet, and grounded. Over time, you realize that family is not a title. It is a feeling of safety, of acceptance, of being able to rest without defense. It exists wherever you are seen without being corrected, heard without being judged, and valued without being controlled. Sometimes this is found within biological ties. Sometimes it is found beyond them. Both are valid. This keynote closes with a powerful truth. You are allowed to choose where you belong. You are allowed to build a life where respect is the foundation, not the reward. When you redefine family through self-respect, you do not lose connection. You gain alignment. And in that alignment, you finally experience what belonging was always meant to feel like.